All right, Marina, you have an agenda. Add some structure to Ilya. He's a mess.
Well, I was going to start with like my favorite, I guess, tidbit that I found out about reading, which is they've done a study that shows that reading increases a person's theory of mind, which is a person's ability to empathize.
I don't think Ilya reads enough then.
I have been reading a lot of history stuff for the last 5 years, and I have to say I have gone back to fiction now briefly because I feel like I feel like Marina has a really good point. Like fiction makes you empathize with the person. Like on the historical level, a lot of the stuff that I read was just about numbers and big picture stuff. And it's hard to empathize. Obviously there's empathy, but it's hard to empathize with a million people, right? Whereas I feel like fiction, you guys were discussing, I watched the episode on the plague. You guys were discussing, how the plague for each individual is different. And that's something that you can empathize with. If you see, a quarter of the European population was wiped out by the Black Death. Okay, that seems bad, but it doesn't have an object to really kind of feel bad for.
Yeah, I read a history book that's a little bit socialist. I think Howard Zinn, and it talks about from the people's perspective. Because usually history is written from the monarch's perspective, the leader's perspective. It's very top down.
Yeah.
But this book tries to teach history from the average person's perspective. So I think in that situation you could kind of empathize because instead of dates and Edward the second, third, and all that kind of stuff, you kind of understand it from there. But I think I agree definitely with what Marina is saying because my favorite book is Crime and Punishment because it's a very popular book, so people will know about it, and I want to look smart. But more important, it helped me actually understand a friend of mine who was dealing with psychiatric crisis at the time, and Crime and Punishment is all crisis, all psychological crisis, nonstop from beginning to end. It helped me understand and empathize and definitely be in that person's shoes because it's hard to understand someone without really seeing it in full color. So yeah, fiction for sure does that, but I think nonfiction can do it as well if written in not a typical nonfiction way.
Yeah, I was just thinking that because I think I would say that nonfiction could be even more powerful in that sense because for example, the book that we read, I'm Glad My Mom Died, very easy to sympathize with and gave such an inside look into what happens with child actors and children who experience an incredibly abusive parent. So
perhaps it's not fiction versus nonfiction. Perhaps it's just a story from a personal story, how good the story is from character arc, because you can have character arcs in nonfiction as well.
Yep.
The other was obviously a massive, massive increase in vocabulary, which is another study that they did, which is kind of clear, but it's very dramatic when they look at children and how much higher their levels of ability to read and write and know vocab is, the more that they read.
To read makes our speaking English good.
I think Steve would definitely agree with that point because he literally leads with Dostoevsky as his favorite author.
Not my favorite author, my favorite book.
I see. Okay.
I don't know if he's my favorite author. Dan Brown.
Dan Brown is your favorite?
Consistently, if I pick up his book, I'm satisfied. Or maybe Haruki Murakami. I don't know.
Don't do this to me, dude. Do not do this to me. Marina, we need to interrogate your view on Haruki Murakami.
I have not read Haruki Murakami, but I'm going to because I've been reading Kafka and I kind of want to read Kafka on the Shore, even though I feel like it's going to be, I don't know. I've gotten mixed reviews on that book.
Okay, so if you don't, I will.
Nothing to do with each other.
I will send it to you for free. I'm never going to come back to it. I will literally, I can ship it to Steve if you want, if you don't feel comfortable giving me, but I'm serious. I own the copy.
If he doesn't ship it to you, he will burn it. He will burn it.
I do not want Haruki, what is his name? Anywhere in my house.
Murakami.
He's
Ilya
out.
tried to get it banned in the libraries.
Yeah, I'm reading Kafka's short stories right now. So once I finish that, I wanna read Kafka.
But from my memory, Kafka on the Shore has nothing to do with
Kafka.
Kafka.
Yep. It does have to do. I feel like his marketing team was like, buzzwords. That's cool.
I don't think he writes any of his books. I think just like
AI.
Dali, like 99% of his art was created by like this team. I think it is all. I think all of his books are ghostwritten
By another mediocre Japanese writer.
Wow, that's a compliment to Murakami that he's mediocre.
We hate him. If you couldn't discern. No, of course.
But yeah, vocabulary, I definitely agree. Definitely with spelling, because I think you can have a very good vocabulary from movies and shows, especially if they're intelligent. But unless you have subtitles on, which a lot of people do, you don't know necessarily how to spell it. So that could cause some problems, even though nowadays you have to kind of be close to spelling because autocorrect. You don't want your vocab to be too good because you just sound annoying. You kind of want to be colloquial. Oh my God. Is that pompous?
I mean, it's knowing your audience. It's knowing your audience.
That's true. It's knowing your audience. That's true.
I guess the other stuff, because it's all common sense, I was just gonna mention that I read a lot for FOMO. I think that's like one of my driving forces for reading. If there's a book out there that everyone is talking about, or it's going to be made into a movie or a show, and it's like very hyped
Oh,
up,
that's what you mean. Okay.
I need to know what's going on. Or same thing if it's a classic. If something's so classical and considered a great literary work, that I'm like, oh, I'm missing out if I don't read it. So
Sounds a little bit seems a little bit disingenuous.
well, it's true curiosity, because if something is great, and if something is talked about a lot, that it gives you credibility that it's good, and then it gives you the chance to talk to other people about it. This is what the hype is about.
I get it, but when you say from FOMO, like imagine you said, "Oh, I went out with my friends because I was afraid of FOMO." Doesn't sound like you really wanted to go out.
Well,
So it doesn't sound like you really want to read the book,
it's
like
more
for
real.
pure reasons.
Well, you can't for reasons.
Yeah, you can. You can want to read a book because you're truly excited about it with nobody else in mind, just pure intrinsic motivation.
Well, the thing is, it's not about telling other people. It's not like I care if other people know that I read something. It's just for myself, right? So it's like other people are not relevant. It's not like I'm aiming to then tell people that I read it. It's just so I know what it is that makes it so special.
Yeah. Is that the only reason that you read? Or is that one of the reasons?
No, it's the reasons. Oh, sorry, Ilya.
Okay.
No, I was gonna say it's like participating in society. But I will say, Marina, like I feel like in my experience, people who, like, to your point, whenever people hype a classic, I feel like a lot of times it's like they hype certain parts of that classic. I don't know. I feel like people who like sit down with War and Peace or like Moby Dick.
Wow. Terrible book.
Like 1,000 pages. Like my girlfriend she's reading it, like reading, very loosely put, reading it. It's over there. I mean, it's a door stopper. Like, and I asked her, like, what, like, how scared are you? Like, throughout the 1,000 pages, and she just said it's a lot of world building. So I think that a lot of those things are, like the classics are sometimes just taught. Like somebody likes them, and they just make it into the curricula, whatever the plural is, and like it's a teachers / academics book. They love to like talk about it. I don't know. In high school, I think back, we read a lot of stuff that was like Kate Chopin. I don't know. Did you guys read The Awakening?
No.
It's like it was like part of our like feminist literature thing. And like, look, I think that there are better books that are representative of feminism. I thought that her book was just kind of crappy,
Mansplaining. How would you know?
But the book sucked. I wouldn't know, but the book sucked. Like it was boring. It was boring to read, and it created this dichotomy where like the girls in our class were expected to like hype the book because it was quote unquote feminist, and then the boys were like, ugh. But the book was literally like a rich woman who was bored with her mid-husband and her like midlife because she was bored. She was like, I want to drown myself in the sea because I feel unfree. And guess what? She does. And it's like,
Spoiler.
yeah, spoiler. Sorry, but like that's but like I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like there are better choices to be made. And like, is Kate Chopin's like The Awakening a classic? I mean, sure, it is, but like I feel like people talk about it without having read it. So,
I think
Yeah.
I think what you're trying to say. I think what you're saying is there's people that, well, first of all, a big reason why people read is because they have to for school. And I personally hated that experience. And one of the reasons why I hated it, I think, is because of like the book report type like way of learning about it. It's like, what are the themes? What are the main characters? This, blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I guess from a teacher perspective, like how else could they teach it? But I personally, like in school, did not like the reading experience. So there's like so Marina's like, there's a FOMO. Ilya, you're saying you have to, but that doesn't say like why you read. Like personally,
I mean, I
Ilya,
definitely-
Ilya, why you read.
So FOMO is one of them for sure. Like I definitely want to know like what's going on. That's definitely a contributory reason. I think that a lot of times, like I read from a very toxic place. I want to say like probably 60% of my reading is motivated by the fact that like I feel that it's quote unquote an activity that develops the mind versus like especially now during a period of fun employment, I almost feel guilty watching an extra episode of a show, even though it's like it's a complicated show. Like it involves characters, all this stuff, versus like picking up a book and reading it. This Charles Portis author guy that I picked up. I mean, his books teach you nothing. It's like I read one of them in like 4 hours. You just read through it. It's funny, but then you put it down and you're like, huh. So I think that the reason I read a lot of it is because I have been told throughout my life that is what is a useful medium to consume.
Well, I don't think it's only you've been told. I think you probably feel a difference when you consume the media, book media compared to show media. You probably feel a difference too.
No, I'm sure that like, look, there is a difference. Everything that like Marina said at the beginning, vocabulary, all that stuff there's definitely that. It definitely develops your imagination. But like, I think that a lot of like society ascribes a certain, like if you read, you are intelligent. Whereas like, that's not necessarily true. Like I've definitely read stuff that, I read it and then did I understand it? Did I take away from it stuff that I should have? I don't know. Goosebumps is another one. I was reading this amazing book. I didn't make it. It's called The 30-Year Genocide, about the genocide of Christians in the Ottoman Empire for like 30 years. And there was this one passage. They had this one passage, and that gave me goosebumps. I like teared up. It was crazy. It was about like this one period of like pogroms against the Armenians. And like this one Turkish official was like, this is illegal. Like, I am not doing this. We are not having these pogroms in my district. And this, like, he's an Ottoman official. Like, he's a soldier. It would be like a German being like, we're not killing Jews in my region. Like, he was, the passage
amazing.
said that he like put on his boots and he personally patrolled the Armenian side of town on foot for 6 hours. Like,
wow.
This high-ranking Pasha.
What a courageous person.
No, I mean, he was just doing his duty. He was like, this is what one ought to do to uphold Ottoman law. So like that kind of shit, like reading that, realizing that, wow, and being moved by that on a page. Like, I don't think I would be as moved by that if I saw it in a movie, because this is like real. There's a document saying it. It's pretty crazy.
I think I just realized we are not using the right words to describe what we're talking about, because it's not why we read. It's why we read books, because it's not why we read is not specific enough. Reading Twitter, reading Reddit, or any social media is a very different experience than reading books.
There's that boomer privilege. There's that boomer page privilege.
I mean, it's a huge difference for me, and I could tell you where I feel it the most is before bed. If I am reading Twitter or Reddit, which I've removed from my phone because it's terrible, compared to reading a book. A book, I'll fall asleep after 2 pages, and like Twitter and Reddit, you can literally go for like doom scrolling for like hours. And it's so interesting. It's like broccoli versus sugar. Like sugar and candy, you could just go blah, 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 blah. At least I can. But broccoli, you're not going to like eat boatloads of it. So it's I find it fascinating. And that's one of the reasons why I read, because A, I fall asleep faster, but B, it's a more calming, pleasant experience that's not programmed to like piss me off / make me happy and back and forth.
And sell you stuff.
And tell me stuff. Yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons it's more of like a almost therapeutic experience.
If I can expand on that, is I hear what you're saying, but not to diminish the fact that there are things like poetry and short stories and novellas that would also kind of potentially go in that book category. And
yeah, sure. Like I guess so then I guess it's not books, then what? Pages?
I don't know, because I would sometimes even put scholarly articles in that category too. I know for me, sometimes I enjoy reading analysis of something, which in and of itself I think could be very fulfilling and interesting and enlightening. I don't know.
So
I think Steve is saying that
I'm
books
so
are
confused.
boring because he falls asleep faster.
Right.
Whereas the algorithm
Right.
is just
Everything else.
yeah.
Well, you know what's actually interesting is sometimes I can read for a long time. It's not always boring. It's just like it puts you in a place where if I'm tired, I'll fall asleep. But if I'm not, I'll read. But I feel like with Instagram and like Reddit and all that stuff, regardless of my energy, you could just go forever.
Well, it
So-
induces you. It's like a drug. I think
Right.
that one can like
Yes.
I don't know. It's just like books to me feel like your brain is doing stuff. It's like lifting weights for your brain because you have to visualize, you have to imagine,
Right.
you have
it's like
to
an exercise.
like remember characters. Yeah, like
Right.
you have to go back. I don't know, like throughout. Like I remember as a child or like as a young adult, teenager, whatever. I used to retain characters so well. Now I'm like I don't even remember names anymore. You know, they're like they
it's
appear,
hard.
they do stuff, and they're gone. So much.
Well, what helps is when you have conversations about books, it solidifies your memory a lot more.
Absolutely. You can't. The conversation is another one, by the way.
Yeah. I wanted to actually go back to Ilya, your point about, and I think you're so right about this, or you called it a toxic reason of reading, for the fact that reading is considered to be I guess, a romanticized hobby. And the interesting thing is I want to do more research on this, because that's not how historically reading was seen, right? Over time. Now that we look at people who read as people who are intellectuals and focused and committed and all that intelligent stuff. But back in the day, reading was kind of seen the same way that we look at television now, where, kids would be told, don't be reading so much because there'd be different types of books. And the books that were just fun were looked down upon. And the books that were looked down upon are now seen as works of literature, like Charles Dickens. So it's just interesting how our perception of reading has evolved over time.
I wasn't aware of any stigma associated with reading. I mean, there, at least on like a general cultural level, there could be subcultures. Like even now, there are subcultures of probably people. I don't want to even name the subcultures because I'd be attacked. But there's.
Were you gonna say vegans?
I'm quite confident there are subcultures of people that would be like, "Oh, Johnny, take away that book, you nerd." Right? Or like, what are you reading for? Put on your glasses. So, but I don't know. Marina, you're aware of a time where general culture looked down upon it?
Because during a period of time where no other media existed, when it was just books, and that's not so much reading as a whole, but the type of reading.
But that's not reading in general. That's a criticism of certain writers.
now I think there's more of a respect for reading as a whole, whereas back in the day it was a lot more specific as to what was considered good reading and what was considered bad reading. And it was just that kids were not always necessarily encouraged to read as they
I
are.
don't know about that. I'm
Oh,
not
no.
familiar with that.
Not me making things up. This is stuff I started to look into. I just haven't fully delved into it.
Got it. Interesting.
I think that
Yeah,
for
I'd be
sure,
very
Pulp Fiction,
surprised
man.
if that. Huh? What?
Like Pulp Fiction, like if you like not the movie, but like if you read, you
No,
know,
but that's not a criticism of reading. That's a criticism of a
of the
genre.
subject, yeah, for sure.
Our romanticizing of reading as being something that smart people do, I think, is because it's true. It's just true. I'm not aware of any culture anywhere that like look down on reading, unless it's, you know where it could be.
Cambodia after the revolution. No glasses, no reading. If you're illiterate, you're not a peasant.
You know where it could be is like the anti witch trials. If like, I don't know, it'd be an interesting thing to research. When has reading been discouraged? We as a society do stigmatize watching TV. Like parents don't want to like encourage their kids to watch too much TV. That's never with books, and I don't think that's ever happened.
To the point about the TV though, right? Like you could watch like I wouldn't want my kids watching 5 hours of Discovery Channel on nuclear physics straight either. You know what I mean? Like it's so I would say that as a medium, TV is way more reviled than reading. Like to Marina's point, like you can read a Nora Roberts book, right, and get about as much, you know, like content, valuable content as you would from like watching a similar show. But between those two, reading would be considered in our society today a more worthwhile pursuit. Like you could be reading smut versus watching smut,
Right.
and reading smut would be like, you know, the better than, or I guess better than, you know, that's what I think is, because it's about screen time. It's passive. You're like letting it wash over you. Your brain is not, or I guess it's not as actively making connections. It's not tapping into all the whatever.
Yeah, and like personally, I have a problem with screen time, specifically with TV and shows. I know it's a vice of mine, and especially when times are rough, like it's like my safe space. So what I've done is I've purposely combined it with biking. So in my office, I have a stationary bike. So whenever I watch anything, I force myself to bike, which stops me from being like yesterday. I was actually watching like an Earth type documentary, which was awesome. But had I not been biking, I would have been able to watch it for 3-4 hours because I would have been like, next episode. But an hour and 20 minutes in, my legs were hurting, and I was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. So, but I don't have to do that with reading. Like I don't have to bike while reading
because I told you that reading
I will naturally stop.
Because you
and not only that, but I'll naturally stop reading. It's not, yeah.
So let me ask you, Steve, what is another reason that you read?
I think it helps with my insomnia sometimes. So sometimes I have trouble like falling asleep. Actually, it's my sleep hygiene. Technically, it's probably the main reason.
Yeah, I know, Steve, a consistent theme in your answers.
Yeah, what's that?
You read books to fall asleep, I guess, the ultimate conclusion.
Steve actually secretly hates reading, and he just does it to fall asleep. That's the key here. During the day, it's all biking and watching documentaries. I know how this is. And then he leads with Crime and Punishment, so you don't question his integrity. Because who wants to talk about Crime and Punishment?
No, it's a great book. I have a whole video on it. I have a whole video on it here on the channel. I mean, learning for sure. Like, so if I read history, you know, a lot. I do love learning about history, and then for fiction, to empathize, yeah, it's a great activity. It's also for these conversations. So I like also to talk about the books, to hear from other people's perspective.
Have you ever been in a situation where you actually were prevented from sleeping because the book just kept you up because you just couldn't like wait to find out more.
I remember Dan Brown's books, Harry Potter. I remember reading until like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So it had like this opposite effect. But I'll make the point that I had the energy to do it. Like when I don't have the energy, I will fall asleep. When I have the energy, then I could read till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So, and it, you know, if the book is good, obviously, like really good.
I have had a book. I mean, I've stayed up reading. I want to say like 1984, like the OG.
Oh my God, I was just
first
thinking.
read.
Oh wait, not 1984. I was thinking 1Q84. Never mind. Okay. My
Do
Haruki
not
Murakami.
even mention those in the same sentence. See, this is just okay. Just if you, this is like him. This is like me coming out, like writing a book that he does this all the time. 1Q84, Kafka on the Shore. It's like building a car called Mercedes-Benz or Pens or
1Q84 was
something.
literally porn. It was like 80% porn. 1Q84.
So why did he have to steal the title? But like anyway, I remember like back in like high school. Yeah, he is a fraud. I mean, 100%. I was crushing pretty hard on this girl named Julia, and I remember this thing because it's like weird. Wilson in 1984, his paramour, lover, whatever, was also named Julia, and I was like, it's fate. 15 / no, I was 15. I was like 14, 15. I was like, this is clearly a book brought to me at a time where I needed it most. So
awesome.
I read that like, no, but I remember staying up to read that and being like, this is freaking cool as hell. But I was like, the way I got put onto reading was I basically, my parents were terrified that my brother and I would forget Russian. So they put us into this like Russian school on Saturdays. It was like an activity where we would come in and like read Russian stuff with this like ex-Moscow teacher, whatever. But she was also a professor of English in Russia. So her thing was English literature. She just came to the US and like, oh, I'm literary and a professor, I'll teach Russian. So, right. But she really did English. And so at one point she was like, wow, you really don't freaking read. And I was like, facts. And she was like, why don't you check out all these books? Because you sound dumb. Like to your point about vocabulary, she was literally like, you do not have a vocabulary.
Wow.
So I was kind of shamed into it. And I kind of dove into it in there. And I remember George Orwell being like one of the first ones. So definitely stayed up a lot with 1984, Animal Farm. What else? There was one book that she recommended. It was called The Dreams of My Russian Summers, which I feel like it had like a growing up, budding sexuality story in it. And I was like, thank you, teacher, for that book. I needed that one as well.
That hit the spot.
Oh, it did. And like, I'm not even, yeah, it definitely contains like, when I opened this book, I was like, it was like 200 pages. It was good. It was like about a kid growing up in like the USSR. But it was definitely like about the sexual part. And I was like, why did you give me this book, lady? Because like she was like my grandma's age. And I was like,
she says boy needs guidance.
But also, yes, like it was so good for the right time. It was just great.
I do enjoy a well-placed sex scene in a book because I feel like...
You know who doesn't have those?
Haruki
fucking Murakami.
He doesn't know moderation with that. That's for
I'm
sure.
curious, Marina, when you read Haruki Murakami, I'm curious about your commentary specifically on those because this man writes sex scenes everywhere, and honestly, they're disgusting to read. Like they're not sexual, they're just gross.
Well, the reason it's gross is because it's always like prepubescent girls.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well.
And 35-year-old men, which are like us. It's disgusting. I think Marina and I read the Court of Thorns and Horny Thingies. Yeah. And I thought that was good, but I was a little bit too much sometimes, I think. Same thing with 1Q80. Yeah, it's like I think it's in that category. What's that category called?
I think romance novel.
Romance novel. It's like one step behind those books with the covers with the guys with the abs, you know,
the Fabio, the long hair.
Which we all know why those books are being read.
Mom porn. It's called. See, okay. mom porn. Like that's looked down upon. If you see somebody with mom porn, you're like, okay.
50
And also,
Shades of Grey. 50 Shades of Grey. Yeah.
we can establish that we read for sexual satisfaction and/or arousal. I think that's been established right now.
All I know is Marina doesn't read for humor because she doesn't have a sense of humor.
That's right.
Damn,
So,
bro, shots fired.
99% of the time that Marina and I have read books together and I find something funny, she's like, no.
You have to see what he finds funny, though. I feel like that matters.
I will definitely admit I have an overactive sense of humor. That's for sure. But you have zero. Ow. Ow.
Perhaps Marina is just
My
more
rib
reserved.
hurts.
I'm a little dead inside, so that's fine.
So humor and sexual gratification. That's why we read. Excellent. But Marina, have you ever read a book that made you laugh?
Yes.
Okay. Which one? You vaguely remember in your childhood. It was the summer of 2005.
There's a handful. No, there have been times where I laughed out loud. I just can't put my finger on it. Aziz Ansari wrote a book, and I thought that one was funny.
Aziz Ansari is funny, especially when he reads Yelp, Google reviews. Oh my God. He reads angry Google reviews and he reads it so well because he's so dramatic about it. Oh my God, it's so good. All right. This was less good than I expected.
Damn,
sorry.
Steve. Wow, harsh criticism.
I had great expectations.
Nice.
That's another book. What is her freaking problem, Miss Havisham? Move on, lady. He left you at the altar. You gotta move the fuck on. It's not your problem. It's his problem. I felt so bad for her. Why did she poor like the girl Estrella or whatever, Estella? Just what are you doing, lady? Why are you making her your like weird revenge tool? Oh, it's so like I hated Charles Dickens. Like I got to be honest with you. Why would I want to read that? It's all about child abuse, spousal abuse, and misery. He is the Dostoevsky of England.
Not to do. It's what not to do.
How about not read him? Don't read him.
Well, maybe if you don't read him, then you will do those things.
I hated it. It's like every page is like being whipped with a crown of thorns.
Sounds kinky.
On that note,
thank you so much, guys, and thank you for doing this together. I really appreciate it. Even though it didn't meet my expectations, I still enjoyed it.
What did you expect? What expectations did you have? List them out, man. We'll
not this.
But what did you want?
Better.
We'll try harder, sir. I will work harder next time. Just like boss.
It could have been my fault. It could have been 100% my fault.